Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I clocked in at 5:42, 12 minutes early because that's how you survive. You start ahead. Unit 1 was at 87% power after a night of grid-induced load-following orders, Unit 2 at 100%, steady as a metronome. The river outside, the James, was low and brown under the pre-dawn, the intake canal running slack as if even the tide was holding its breath. The plant's twin containment domes rose on the far side of the turbine building, pale shells with red obstruction lights blinking like patient heartbeats. We were short-handed from the start. The shift manager, Harlan, had texted me at 4:10. Local roads snarled. Bring overnight kit. I keep one in my trunk anyway. Thermal mug, granola bars, a change of clothes, a paperback I never read. On the access road, the security checkpoint's barrier stayed up longer than usual between cars. The guard's hands shook around a clipboard. His eyes flicked to the news playing in the booth. A muted crawl of footage from cities I'd never worked in, streets I'd never driven, people I would never meet. The captions didn't say zombie. They said civil disturbance, public safety, shelter in place. Inside, I badged through to the control room, passing the framed photographs. Commissioning day, the ribbon cutting, a crew shot from before my time, the mustaches and sideburns too sincere to be ironic. Control room smell. Dust filtered to the edge of existence, warm electronics, coffee that had been reheated one time too many. On the panels, our world was orderly. Gauges steady, synchroscope centered, steam generator levels in their green bands. The annunciator strips slept. It was the calmest place left on Earth. "Morning," said Marisol Vega, the instrument and controls tech who'd stayed over from nights. She was short, compact, a coil spring of competence with a Bosch multimeter hanging off her belt. There was a smear of graphite on her forearm. Her brown hair was braided tight and coiled like a lanyard under her cap. "You see the traffic cams?" I nodded. I saw enough. She handed me the shift turnover log. Harlan's voice cut across the speakers from the shift manager's desk. "Ethan, you've got the stick. More no-shows than I like. We may lose half the day shift. If the grid keeps oscillating, we'll need you backing Unit 1 down to 75. "Copy," I said, sliding into the senior reactor operator chair. The chair is nothing special. No throne, no sci-fi high-backed command seat. It's a swivel with a cushion and a history of spills. What matters is what your hands do while you're in it. On my first week as a licensed operator, an old-timer told me, "The plant is designed to forgive. That's why we love PWRs. Pressurized water reactor. Reactor coolant never flashes to steam. It loops. A hidden heart, through hot leg and cold leg, through reactor coolant pumps taller than me, through the steam generator's tubes where heat crosses the wall and makes the second loop into invisible clouds. Forgiveness is engineered in. Negative temperature coefficients, rods with boron carbide, redundant trains, checklists thicker than your fist. Forgiveness if you behave." At 6:15, we got our first taste of misbehavior. Off-site power flickered for just 2 seconds, long enough to paint a glitch into the turbine governor's memory, long enough to tickle the auto voltage regulators and bring a chorus of alarms. The station batteries took the load and the UPS systems bridged the gap like they were born to do. Then the grid came back with a little grin, like a child after knocking over a lamp. "Nice of them to warn us," Marisol murmured, hunched over the digital SCADA panel, measuring a slight drift in a feedwater flow transmitter. "We keep the old hard panels for a reason. switches with definite throws, knife-edge meters, each labeled with faded dymo tape and maintenance stickers. The SCADA screens are fast and convenient when they behave, but they're like the grid. When they act up, you remember what's real by touching it. Security called at 6:28. The motion sensors in the turbine hall had tripped, several in sequence along the condenser bay. "Probably birds again," the security supervisor, Denny, said. He sounded out of breath. I pictured him in his vest and duty belt, moving along concrete corridors that all smell of the same thing: a clean dampness, a hint of river water flash-boiled and condensed 1,000 times a day. "Confirm your cams," Harlan told him over the radio. "And keep off the intake road unless you have to. We've got a lot going on." A few minutes later, our security video feeds stuttered, rolled, and froze on a black and white frame of open floor. The edge of the low-pressure turbine casing. A puddle of condensed steam along the floor drain. A shape in the distance near the condenser heads, human-sized, which could have been a shadow, or a curtain of cooling mist, or something standing unnaturally still. "Bad connection," Marisol said. "That camera drops every time somebody slams the locker room door." I logged the flicker, the alarms, the motion. That's what you do. You don't know which note will matter later, so you record everything that might. Unit 1 at 83% power and falling per grid request. RCS pressure at set point, pressurizer levels stable. Steam generator levels at 48-51%. I wrote in capital letters because later, when the adrenaline uncurls, you will be glad for your own legibility. At 7:05, Harlan came to the door and didn't step through. He rested his hand on the crash bar and looked at me with an expression I'd seen twice before. Once when my first child was born, once when my mother passed. The exact same configuration of awe and helplessness that tells you the moment is bigger than your preparation. "Ethan," he said, "we've got confirmed civil unrest on the access highway. Sheriff's Department says to hold position. I need to keep people off the yard unless they're ready to stay." "How many do we have?" I asked, and then added, "Really?" "On paper, 31. He looked down. "On deck, 16. If the lines drop again, we will isolate and we will write it down. You take Unit 1, Maul takes Unit 2. I'm here as long as phones work." Phones did not work for long. The landlines went strangely static, like listening to cicadas through a door. Cell service slowed, then hiccuped into a mode where everything comes at 10 minutes late. The last full conversation I had with anyone not in the plant was my wife, at 7:22. "I'm okay," I told her. "We're on the early end of something. Stay away from the city." The school sent a message. The voice of our daughter, half in whisper, half in challenge, bled into the line. They locked the doors. "Dad, when are you home?" "When it's safe," I said. "You know where the lanterns are. You know which neighbor has the generator." The call ended with the soft click of a system deciding we had nothing essential left to say. At 7:39, the grid wobbled again. We felt the turbine try to save it, our generator hunting for a sync with a cousin line that wasn't sure of itself. Turbine inlet pressure rose, fell, rose again. "Taking the down power," I said, and laid my hand on the throttle as if it were the skull of a sleeping animal. The control room hummed. There's a particular hum to a turbine hall at power, a subsonic presence that is felt more than heard, which changes when you touch the machine. We brought Unit 1 steadily down toward 75, then 70, our helium balloon sinking to the ceiling, our weight lightening with purpose. At 8:06, we lost a bank of security cameras. At 8:11, the motion sensors in the turbine hall fired again, this time in a path that moved from the eastern side of the condenser to the auxiliary bay door. "Denny?" Harlan said. "What are you seeing?" "Shadowy figures moving strange," Denny said, and then the line dissolved into bursts that carried only tone, no words, like someone trying to speak underwater. Marisol looked up at the SCADA screen. AFW Train B pressure is prickly. Define prickly. Trending, but not noisy, like a bubble in a straw. Auxiliary feed water is the quiet hero of a PWR. When the main feed water trips, when the pumps lose their cross-tie or the turbine trips, AFW is there, 2 trains, one on diesel-backed power, one with a steam-driven pump to keep the steam generators watered so they can keep pulling heat out of the primary loop. You can lose a lot at a nuclear plant and still be safe. Lose feed, lose heat sink, and you have a bad day you will remember for the rest of your life. I put a sticky note on the AFW panel as if labeling the problem gave us an edge over it. Watch B train suction pressure. "Let's walk it," I told Marisol. "Keep radios on channel 3. I'll stay on headset to Harlan." We don't leave the control room lightly. You move like a diver moving away from his air. But early is better than late. We propped the heavy door open with the wedge, killed the door alarm with the service key, and stepped into the corridor. Fluorescent lights and green floors, and posters reminding you to lift with your knees and to wear hearing protection where required. The posters are always a little faded, like the safety message itself has endured too many shifts and too much coffee. Marisol led. Her footfalls were precise, every heel strike identical like she had mapped the traction underfoot. We ducked past a maintenance cart parked at a crooked angle, its clipboard hanging by its string, a wrench rolling in slow increments with every tremor of the floor. From far away through concrete and steel, the turbine's thrum came in faint pulses like a distant highway. The AFW room is a place most visitors never see, and most photographs never capture. It is not where the glamour lives. It's pipes pigging around pumps, manual valves painted in OSHA colors, labels that once were white and are now the color of tea. You can smell the oil in the pump bearings, the faint salty tang that says the river is close. B-train pressure was indeed prickly, oscillating in a tiny sawtooth around nominal suction head. The sight glass on the strainer bowl showed what looked like foam. "Air ingestion?" Marisol said, crouched, pen tapping her lip. "Or turbulence upstream," I said. "Suction line could be cavitating on a partial blockage, or the sensors are grumpy." She glanced at the strainer's differential pressure gauge. "DP is up 4 psi from last check." She looked over her shoulder. "We clean it now, or we pray." "We wait," I said. "We can't take it down while the grid is playing hopscotch." We made it back to the control room at 8:44. Harlan was at the phone station, both hands on the desk, his jaw working as if he were chewing something that wouldn't break down. "We lost 2 more on the road," he said. They turned around. "Sheriff warns there are people—" He stopped, recalibrated. "He warns there are individuals obstructing traffic and acting unpredictably. We will be thin for relief." "I can run long," I said. "So can Marisol." Marisol gave me a look that said, obviously. The SCADA screens twitched at 8:50 and then again at 8:56. Menus popping in and out, cursor freezing as if a ghost hand held the mouse. When the system sulks, it's like a sullen teenager. No warnings, just a refusal to cooperate. You can't argue with it, you work around it. I slid the EOP binder, Emergency Operating Procedures, closer. Its spines are black plastic and tricolor tabs. It is the one book you never pretend to memorize and never pretend to ignore. E0, reactor trip or safety injection. E1, loss of reactor or secondary coolant. ECA 0.0, loss of all AC power. Step by step, in language that assumes you are calm even when you are not. At 9:03, the turbine hall motion sensors tripped again, closer now to the auxiliary door. A camera feed flickered back to life for half a second, enough to show a figure in the distance. A man, maybe, in a torn shirt, mouth open in a sound we couldn't hear, and then the picture jittered sideways and went black. Another sensor tripped 15 seconds later, then another. The distribution board for that quadrant showed a spike, then a drop, then a deadness across 3 branch circuits that cut the power to the cameras for good. "I want to lock the control room," Harlan said. "There is a procedure for that, CR isolation. Not because of zombies, because of fire, or a steam line break, or an attack you can't outthink. We go through drills where we imagine smoke filling these corridors. We imagine outsiders with bad intentions. You run the drill, and then you go to lunch and talk about football scores. It's not supposed to bleed into a Tuesday." "Do it," I said. "Barricade the door. Marisol, help me pull the maintenance cabinet." We dragged the rolling cabinet against the door. It wasn't much, a waist-high rectangle of drawers full of spare fuses and chart paper. We added a portable nitrogen bottle that belonged to the condenser layup team, a rack of manuals nobody had read since the design basis accident set in the 1970s, and a maintenance cart left orphaned in the wrong hallway. We threaded a steel chain through the crash bar and the handle, and snapped a padlock shut, then taped over the window with cardboard and gaffer's tape. Safe is never absolute. It is a ratio and a decision. At 9:33, the grid sagged and didn't spring back. Bus voltages drooped like a dying heartbeat. The alarms came in steady now, patient and unwavering. Off-site power under voltage. Turbine governor runback. Switchyard breaker chatter. We've trained this chain so many times that your mouth begins to form the words before the alarms arrive. "Prepare to trip," I said, and then trip. The control rods fell. The reactor stopped fissioning in a handful of seconds that still feel like a lifetime when you are listening for every creak, watching for every stubborn rod that drops slowly or refuses to indicate full in. The primary loop remained hot and pressurized, decay heat flushing out to the steam generators, which drank and boiled like kettles. The main feedwater pumps kicked in, then sighed down per design. The main turbine wound itself to a stop, the blades slowing through the sonic ranges, the big shaft taking its sweet time to surrender its momentum. AFW train. A started clean. The steam-driven pump took off with a whisper that never fails to surprise me. Such a small sound to carry such load. Train B came up reluctantly, flirted with flow, then kicked itself offline and asked to be petted. Its suction pressure bounced like a nervous rabbit. Its logic sent it into an auto-stop. "Manual," Marisol said. "We've got it." "Don't fight the logic unless you mean to," I said. And then I meant to. Do it. We started B-train in manual and coaxed it up to flow while watching the strainer's DP climb another half-sigh. Somewhere downstream from there, something was not as clean as it ought to be. Air, debris, a careless bit of rag left in a line. You'd be surprised what people leave behind inside the guts of an industrial plant. I'd seen a soda can once, flattened like a relic, pulled from a blowdown line on a unit 900 miles from here. We rode it. You don't yank at a struggling machine, you lend it stubbornness. The levels in the steam generators steadied. The RCS cooled a little. The pressurizer level trimmed down in that dignified way the pressurizer has, like an elder in a crowded room asking for space with a raised eyebrow. At 10:02, a new alarm came in. Diesel generator day tank low filtered fuel. It was the kind of benign phrase you want to ignore because nothing is on fire and everything else is noisy. But the EDGs were our heartbeat now. The plant's great machines can hum on their own for a while, coasts and flywheels and the conservation of glory. But to keep the pumps pumping and the valves actuating, you need electricity. Offsite was gone. All AC power came from in here, and that fuel level message said, "You can run, but you can't run forever." Harlan came to my elbow. "Fuel trucks won't make it today," he said. "They told me they'd try when it's better." "When it's better," I repeated. "The filtered tanks can be topped from the raw storage with manual transfer," Marisol said, already turning pages in the diesel service manual. "But we'll need to move through the auxiliary bay to reach the hand valves, unless we use the back corridor past the intake map room." "The intake map room?" I said, with a picture in my head of a space I had visited exactly twice, a room with nautical charts on the wall where the intake canal bends, where the carp are the size of small dogs and the blue herons walk like old men. "That corridor is narrow. If something is in it, we go the other way," she said without looking up. "Options are fragile, Ethan. Pick one and go." "There's a truth you learn in this job. If you wait for perfect certainty, you will not move. The plant is a long conversation with entropy. You have to keep talking." "Okay," I said. "We'll keep AFWB alive the best we can. We'll start a cold shutdown. We'll work the EDG transfers. And we will barricade the hell out of this door while we do it." We executed the procedure like we were making a bed in a storm. Stopped the reactor coolant pumps in sequence once temperatures allowed, moved toward natural circulation through density difference like the textbooks love to draw, throttled AFW to track steam generator level, cracked the atmospheric relief valves to bleed steam to the sky where it would vanish into January air, where nobody would see it as anything but fog. We notified the NRC but got a busy tone that was likely the universe telling us, "Do what you trained to do." The logbook filled, line by line. 10:18, CRDM breakers inspected, all rods in. Zirconium fire risk tab reviewed, temperature safe, no cladding issues. 10:34, AFWB suction pressure still squirrely, DPP now +6. 5 Passai, we'll watch for strainer swap. 10:41, EDG a fuel transfer commenced per manual, EDGB transfer pending. 10:52, spent fuel pool level down 2 inches per normal cooling, wrote makeup water when stable. "Makeup source?" Marisol said. "RWST?" The refueling water storage tank is a massive reserve of borated water, cool and clean and ready to be the plant's blood in an emergency. It sits in the protected plant yard behind security fences and rules. It is the water you pray you never see cascading down a stairwell. "Not RWST," I said. "We'll keep that for SI if we ever needed it. Use the demineralized line from the condensate polisher makeups. We'll keep the pH where the fuel pool likes it." The spent fuel pool holds the used fuel assemblies that have cooled off after their years in the core. They still give off heat, less and less over time, but they still want water above them like a blanket, meters of it, to keep their radiation where it belongs, inside cement and steel and absorbed by your careful distance. We put the fuel pool on our list, makeup ready. In the hierarchy of emergencies, the fuel in the core is your first child, the fuel in the pool is your second, and then come the machines that move water and heat, the creatures that breathe and drag and push because you tell them to. At 11:16, it got louder outside our door, a noise that is not mechanical, a noise that is not radio, not boots or laughter or coughs, something that learned how to be human and forgot. We had already turned off the corridor lights. Control room isolation includes lighting patterns like a stage set. The emergency light above our door stayed on, a dim domestic yellow that turned a little window into a square of honey. Something moved on the other side of it. The cardboard flexed inward once, twice. "Stay back," Harlan said, voice firm but not sharp. "Stay back, please." We had a radio set to channel 3 with a headset for each of us. Through the foam of the ear cup, I could still hear the faint scrape of the chain shifting on the crash bar. Then a thump. It was not a battering ram and not a fist. It was a body learning how to hit a door with its shoulder. Another. The sound traveled through the chain and into the maintenance cabinet and into my hands braced on the cabinet's top. Our barricade shivered. The padlock held fast. The chain went taut. The crash bar squealed. "Don't open," Marisol said softly, as if we needed telling. "Don't talk to it either." We did not talk to it. We turned our attention to the panels, because that is what we can control. The annunciators had gone from orchestra to chamber music to a single instrument. AFW separator high DP. That B train strainer was choking to the edge. It would take a human hand to open and clean it, and the hand would have to be in a room that might not be empty. "I can get it," Marisol said. "No," I said, "not yet." Then to Harlan, "I'm going to shift more load to A train. Let B idle. We eat the headroom." "Proceed," he said. At 11:34, we made up the spent fuel pool with demineralized water routed through a temporary line we'd used once before during a maintenance evolution. The valve handles are there, painted red like the tongues of animals. The flow meter spun, its little turbine whirring like someone breathing calmly. I wrote it in the log. Makeup to SFP commenced. A simple line that says, "The past will not get away from us if we give it what it needs." At 11:52, the diesel fuel transfer stalled. The filtered tank level rose to 68%, then to 70%, then held. The manual valve we needed was down the corridor that passed the intake map room, behind a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only," which is a phrase that looks like authority but feels like a dare, when the world on the other side is acting like it has forgotten the meaning of the word authorized. "I'll go," Harlan said. "No," I said. "You stay and coordinate. I'm the SRO. I go." I looked at Marisol. With Vega, she won't let me do anything stupid. Huey, we packed like hikers for a short trip we didn't want to take. Radios. The mechanical keyring that weighs as much as a small animal. A crowbar because courage is good but leverage is better. 2 headlamps clipped to hard hats. A handheld CO meter out of habit, and a digital dosimeter out of principle. I took a fire axe because something in me wanted the weight. It hung in my hand like the last sentence in a conversation. We cracked the control room door. The chain creaked. The padlock groaned. The maintenance cabinet slid with the sound of a filing cabinet moved across linoleum on the day you retire. The corridor smelled like stale coffee and something else. A damp animal scent that normally belongs only to the river after a rain. We moved. The intake map room hallway is local geography given physical form. Long and straight, then a jog where the wall bulges around the corner of an old equipment room nobody uses because the drawings say it isn't really there. The walls have pushpin maps of the river's gray braid and the canal's geometry. The screens that keep the fish out and the plants thirst in. There's a framed photo of a blue heron standing on one foot atop a bollard, looking like a line drawing that gave up and became a bird. Halfway down the corridor we found the first smear. Not blood. Rust. A palm-sized smear of red-brown where something metal had scraped the cinder block while it was carried by someone who did not look where they were going. My brain was grateful for rust. It is a simple story. Oxygen meets iron, and they embrace. We passed a door with its window taped over from the inside. That was us. We tape over windows not because of monsters, but because of light discipline in a drill. Puppets become habits. Habits become decisions. At the end of the hall, the manual valve perched waist-high, its chain secured with a lock that looked new because it was. This valve is not meant to be played with. We had the key. I slid it in. For a moment, my hands were clever, their muscle memory taking over. The lock popped. The chain drooped. A breeze flowed along the corridor from somewhere deep in the plant, from an intake louver that didn't know the world had shifted. It carried the smell of the river, mud and water, and the faint ghost of fish. It also carried something that made the hair on my arms rise, a thin, sweet odor like old fruit left too long. We heard them before we saw them, a shuffling from around the jog, a dragging sound that in a machine has a meaning you can diagnose, but in a body says everything you don't want to put in words. I raised the fire axe without thinking. Marisol touched my elbow. "Quiet," she mouthed. We moved back the way we'd come in micro-steps. Toe heel, the way you move across a hardwood floor that belongs to someone you love. We pressed ourselves against the bulge in the wall where the old room intrudes. The shuffling didn't speed up, didn't slow down. It passed the map room door. Through the taped-over window, a shadow dragged across the rectangle of light like a cloud. There were two of them. People, or what had been people, wearing work boots and orange vests. The helmets had fallen off. One had a radio at his belt, swinging like a metronome. They moved like they were underwater, their feet forgetting the part about lifting, their toes doing too much work. They did not speak. They panted like men who had run a race and then forgot how to stop breathing hard. When they were gone, when the sound thinned to the silence of a plant in a new mode, we slid the valve open 1/4. You do not slam a manual valve open on a fuel transfer. You listen to the sound of fluid traveling. You crack it, you let the line fill, you watch your gauges in your head. The diesel hum in the belly of the plant deepened by a tone, as if grateful for the drink. We backed away, closed the chain with the lock, and moved fast without running, which is a skill we all learn here. Move with purpose, betray nothing to the cameras, keep your breathing in the range that carries oxygen without broadcasting panic. Back in the control room, I put the axe down carefully, like it was fragile. The three of us, me, Marisol, and Harlan, stood in a triangle and didn't say anything for a full 10 breaths. "Fuel is transferring," I said finally. "We're okay." He nodded. "We've got a call from the switchyard breaker house. The auxiliary transformer is hot. They're isolating. We may be islanded all day." "Fine," I said. We wanted a quiet day anyway. We resumed the shutdown. The cold shutdown is the choreography of patience. We stepped down through modes like someone changing gears on an old truck, from Mode 3, hot standby, to Mode 4, hot shutdown, to Mode 5, cold shutdown. Each mode has its rules, its permission slips, its watchstanders in your head. Fluids change density. Metal shrinks with temperature. Clearances widen. Pumps go quiet. Valves think before they act. You keep the RCS boron concentration where it needs to be. You hold the pressurizer in its comfort zone. You bleed heat to the atmosphere in the slow hiss that never fails to make me think of a kettle in a kitchen where someone is cooking soup. At 12:40, the SCADA screens decided they were art and not engineering. Windows moved to places they did not belong. Numbers changed fonts like teenagers changing their shirt in the hallway between classes. Then they froze. A minute later, they were back. A minute after that, they were gone for good. We slid the plexiglass covers up and worked by hand on the hard panels, switches that have weight and lamps that burn and gauges that can be tapped gently with a knuckle to wake them. The plant is older than me. It remembers when people worked like this every day. A PWR is not a fragile violin. It is a ship's engine room, overbuilt and compassionate. We were home on these panels. "Unit 2?" I asked. "Stable," Harlan said, without looking up from the second set of panels. "Maul is a rock. He could keep this place steady with a crank and a rope." At 13:05, another call from security. The voice was not Denny's. It was a young officer whose name I couldn't place right away. He sounded like he'd skipped a decade and grown up in an hour. "We have unknowns inside the fence," he said, each word used as little as possible. "We are containing. Do not open doors." "Understood," Harlan said. "You contain, we will reduce hazards." The word hazards in this job means everything from steam lines that might break to handrails that might be loose. It also means the human wild card, the one with bad intent or with no intent left, whose presence transforms a well-designed space into a maze. At 1342, as we crossed into Mode 5, the AFWB train DP alarm went to its alarm tone and stayed there. It's a humble alarm. Not shrill, not designed to be your whole world. Just a persistent suggestion. This is getting worse. "We swap the strainer," Marisol said. "Or we lose B for sure." "We have A," I said. "We can fly on one wing." She gave me a look. "We can, until we can't. You know how Rube Goldberg hates a plant." She was right. It is a truth they don't put on the posters. Problems travel in packs. They show up holding hands. If B failed later, during a moment when A coughed, we'd have a story to tell that nobody would want to hear. If we swapped now, we could pick the timing. "I'll go," she said. "Take the axe," I said. "Take the chain, take your arrogance, and leave me some." "I don't need arrogance," she said, grinning without humor. "I have torque." She left. I watched the corridor camera that still functioned, the one inside the control room pointed at the door. Old habit. It shows you nothing useful and calms you anyway. I kept my eyes on the panel while a second set of eyes in my head watched the absence of movement on the threshold. Minutes do long tricks when you are listening for a radio call. At 1352, she came back on channel 3. "Strainer swapped," she said. "DP dropping. It was full of something that looks like cotton, but isn't." I bagged it. Her breathing sounded like the ocean. "Saw 2 more in the auxiliary corridor. They look like shift workers who forgot their names. One banged his shoulder into the wrong wall and didn't notice." "You okay?" I said. "Because you ask that even when you know the answer." "Never better," she said. "I hate cardio." I laughed. It surprised me. It sounded normal. We was keyed to the work because the work itself was a bridge. Each step carried us across the prairies of weirdness into the next place where physics behaved. We bled heat. We trimmed flow. We kept the fuel pool full with the makeup line. I thought of the fuel bundles under that blue water. The way Cherenkov light looks when you stand on the bridge. A glow that is not really blue, a color your brain calls blue because it doesn't have another name for what electrons do to water when they move too fast. The fuel does not care about human stories. It only asks for water where we promised it would be. At 1440, the emergency siren that rings for the county, our visitor alert system, triggered by itself. It whined into life as if someone with a vintage record player had dropped a needle into its groove. The control room annunciator for siren activation flashed with that measured cadence that tells you to breathe. Harlan tried to silence it from the panel, then from the backup. It kept on. Somewhere in the county, in living rooms where I have never sat, in kitchens where I will never drink coffee, people were hearing the long, thin sound that means you should go inside and turn on the radio. That means, please do not stop to look at the river. That means your plant had a thought and decided to tell you. "Quirk," Harlan said. "Interlock glitch, or the system is lonely." At 1510, the switchyard reported a line segment acting like a violin string. They isolated it, reconfigured, watched load flow like a man watching a river after a storm. Those men are good. They are magicians who memorize knots. But today the knots were in their shoulders and in their throats, and in the messages they tried to send to us, to each other, to anyone. I wrote their call down in my log. It felt like putting a marker on a map for a part of the world that still has a name. The light outside the control room dimmed early, the kind of afternoon that gets old before dinner. The windows high near the ceiling took on the color of wet cardboard. In containment, the temperatures slid down, and the humidity settled out in drips that made neat, dark commas on the metal floors. Unit 2 stayed steady in its own dependence, Maul narrating to himself on his side of the control room in a low voice that made him sound like a radio announcer reading school closings. At 16:20, I realized we hadn't eaten. I went to the break room, keeping my hand on the radio with the same possessiveness you keep on the back of a child's coat in a parking lot. The vending machines glowed like space heaters. I punched for a sandwich that promised turkey and delivered salt. I brought 3 back and a handful of bottled water. We chewed as if we had to prove something. I should call home again, I said, then didn't. They know I'm here. Home knows, Harlan said. Home is hydrating the neighbor's garden and teaching your daughter how to win an argument with a smoke detector. He looked at me as if apologizing for saying something gentle. It got dark outside, and when it gets dark inside a plant like this, you feel the architecture. The way the hallways are bones and the rooms are organs and the ducts are veins. The emergency lighting casts the green floors in a pale wash, the kind of light you see in aquariums at night. We took shifts resting our eyes in the break room, 20 minutes at a time, a nap that does not deserve the name sleep. At 18:05, our fuel pool makeup line lost flow. Not zero, a stutter, the kind of stutter you ignore until it becomes a cough. I watched the level recorder pencil a slow, shallow slope. The pool is big. It is not a bathtub. It will not go dry if you sneeze. But breathing with it is better than waiting for a decision to make itself for you. Portable pump, Marisol said immediately. The little diesel one from the intake staging area. We can swing a hose to the pool fill and give it a boost, or we can fix the demon line if it's a manual valve drift. Portable pump means the intake canal road, I said, and the motion alarms liked that road today. We either go patch the line or we go get the pump, she said. Pick. I looked at Harlan. He looked at the ceiling like it held the answer, then at me. You're the SRO, he said. That is the compliment and the curse. A senior reactor operator is a license and a sentence. It means you say, I did this, when you record something you did with a dozen hands. I looked at the panels, at the good work we had already done, at the way the gauges seemed to approve. We were in cold shutdown on Unit 1, decay heat managed, AFW stable, EDGs sipping their fuel like misers. The fuel pool wanted a steadier drink, nothing more. The choice was between leaving the island of the control room with a small team to grab a portable pump that would be useful later if things got really thin, or staying and trusting we could nurse the line back up and keep the pool happy with what we already had. It wasn't a coin toss, but it wasn't a theorem either. The room breathed. The siren outside somewhere had tripped again and stuck like a vinyl record left to spin. Stay, I said. We keep it together from in here. If we leave and the door doesn't open for us again, the panels are alone. The pool can wait for us to love it in a boring way. Marisol's mouth twisted. Boring is my love language. She put on a headlamp. I'll find the manual valve for the demon line. It's probably just drift. Take the radio, Harlan said. And the axe, I said. No, she said. This time, I'll take a crescent wrench. I'd rather bend something than break it. The corridor swallowed her. The radio murmured in my ear, her occasional passing junction, at valve. It's sticky, which is instrument tech for this is mine to fix and you will stay out of it. The level recorder for the pool sharpened its line to something flatter. I felt my shoulders lower half an inch and only then realized how high they had been. I took the logbook. I wrote, 1833, SFP makeup line, flow stabilized after manual valve adjustment in Demine corridor. Auxiliary pump retrieval deferred. Operator decision to remain in control room for cold shutdown integrity. I underlined the last sentence. If someone later asked me, what did you choose? I wanted to leave them no room to misunderstand. At 19 o'clock, a train of thumps moved down the outside corridor, the unison shoulder hits of creatures who had learned to move together without words. They hit the maintenance cabinet that we had wedged. The cabinet rattled. One of the drawers popped open an inch and then shut again as if embarrassed. The padlock held. The chain creaked. Then the thumps moved past. Your uncle's boots on the stairs after a party, your neighbor's trash can falling over in the wind. Night came in full. The plant settled into its nocturnal shape. We had no relief coming. The roads were full of warnings and blue lights and video frames that human eyes refused to trust. Maul, across the room, kept Unit 2 safe with the casual intensity of a man playing chess against time. Harlan divided himself into assignments, into 2 phones, into a radio that still worked when it wanted to. At 21:15, the EDGA coughed once and then relit. An automatic self-test it had no business running but did anyway because machines sometimes play their own games when you are not looking. We stared at it the way you stare at a child who has decided to climb onto the back of the couch. Don't, I told it, because talking to machines is its own liturgy, and sometimes the machines choose to behave because you have spoken to them like they are people who can be better. At 22:30, a call came in on a landline we had assumed was dead. It rang like an old bell in a school, pure, mortal, surprised to be heard. Harlan grabbed it. "Control," he said. He listened, said copy, listened again and said, "We're doing that. We're doing it all." He hung up and looked at me. "Corporate," he said. "One of them, anyway. They asked how many we were and told me what a good job we were doing." "Did you tell them how much paperwork this is?" I asked. He smiled. It made him look 20 years younger. I told them we had the right crew. At 23:03, the siren outside tripped again. A loop that would keep looping until someone with a key in a county office that might never open again pressed a stop button that didn't care about zombies or fear or metaphors. At 23:40, we prepped for the last action in the book for the night. The final insertion of the last control rod is a formal act, not just as a consequence of the earlier trip. We had been in Mode 5 for hours. The rods were in, but there is a ritual to it, a clean motion that you perform to say, "This is the end of a story we controlled." Even if you're already safe, you do the thing that makes you safer, because a ceremony is not just for the observers, it is for you. "Ready?" I said. "Ready?" said Harlan. "Born ready," said Marisol, who had returned like a cat, soundless and inevitable, her headlamp a halo left sitting over her hood. We keyed the panel. We verified the permissives. We confirmed there was no boron dilution path we had left open, no small cruelty left to metastasize into a headline. The annunciator for Reactor trip glowed its thin red like a votive candle. I rested my finger on the key switch. I thought of the first day I had touched one like it. As a trainee, my hands sweating despite the air that always runs a little cool in here. I thought of the mentor who had told me that people and plants both like steady hands and gentle promises. I thought of my daughter and her science fair volcano. I thought of the river and the blue heron and the smell of diesel that lingered in the intake road like a reminder that all engines burn something. I turned the key. The panel accepted our decision with the humility of a servant who has done this for kings and for fools. The rod-bottom lights glowed with such sensitivity that if you were an artist you might have wept. The recorders scratched their tidy lines. The control room's background hum dropped into a new register that I will always think of as night. The siren in the county kept singing, stuck on a memory. Somewhere past that, beyond the fences and the canal and the dark wells of the roads, 1,000 homes heard it and wondered whether it was meant for them. In here, we listened to it as if it were rain on a roof. I signed the logbook. I wrote the time in digits that would be easy to read because later matters. I wrote, final control, rod insertion confirmed, cold shutdown maintained, SFP makeup established, AFWB train strainer swapped, DP within normal, edge fuel transfer complete, level stable, control room secured. I initialed it. The ink felt like a contract. Good work, Harlan said. It sounded like more than 2 words. We're not done, Marisol said, but she let herself lean against the panel like a friend leaning against a fence talking about gardens. I stood up, my knees noticed, but with courtesy. The control room door creaked in its frame, a metal sound that has nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with the way metal changes shape when it forgets the day's warmth. The emergency light over the door cast a thin coin of yellow onto the floor, a circle I could step into if I wanted to feel brighter. I'll take a walk, I said. Harlan raised an eyebrow. Just to the hallway, I said. To listen. He nodded. Keep radio on 3. I stepped into the little airlock we had made between our barricade and the door. The corridor beyond lay like a photograph of itself. The sheen on the waxed floor, the polite mouth of the exit sign, the places where boots had scuffed and where wheels had left their fine black penciling. The smell was the plant smell. Paint and oil and human life boiled down to a clean paragraph. At the far end of the corridor, a red square blinked into being with a rhythm I know in my bones. It was the reactor trip annunciator light on the repeater panel over the emergency exit. It pulsed, steady, metronomic, patient, like a small heartbeat insisting that time still moves forward. Behind me, in the control room, the siren's distant song threaded through the electronics and the human voices and the pages of the EOP binder as if the whole world were a record with a scratch we'd simply learn to step around. I took one breath. I thought of the intake canal and the portable pump and the choice we had not taken. The little cart we hadn't driven past the carp that hang like broken punctuation in the brown water. I thought of how tomorrow, or what will count as tomorrow, we might take that road, if we felt the pull to make the pool's life easier, if the corridors wanted our footsteps again. But for now, the plant was quiet and the core was still, and the city could have its drama without us. I stepped into the hallway, into the coin of light. The door whispered shut behind me and clicked in a way that said, for now, we are inside, and the world is outside, and that is a boundary that means something. Somewhere in the distance, the emergency siren kept looping, a tireless chorus from a machine that isn't paid to feel. The red square pulsed at the end of the hall, the reactor trip annunciator, our small red star, and I walked toward it, not quickly and not slow, the way you walk toward something you have chosen. I never did write in the logbook what we called the ones in the corridor. The logbook is not a diary. It does not record fear or guesswork or rumors in the parking lot. It records facts that others can use, numbers anchored to equipment that wants numbers, decisions tied by string to bearings and seals and clearances. The words we didn't use, zombie, outbreak, cursed, infected, those belong to other rooms, to other storytellers. What I did write, in block letters at the bottom of the page before I handed the book to Marisol to initial her part, was this. On this shift, we kept the core stable. Not because we were heroes, because that's the job. You show up early. You stay late when relief doesn't come. You know which valves sing when they turn. You know that a light that blinks red isn't always an anger. Sometimes it's a promise. You choose to hold the core, not because you fear what happens if you let it run without you, but because you love what happens when it listens. The outside world can have its noise. In here, the annunciator pulsed, the panels hummed, the air moved in measured breaths, and the plant, in its untidy, forgiving way, remembered how to sleep. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.